Hello, everyone, and welcome back if you're coming back, and welcome to you if this is your first time viewing this series. Peace be with the righteous of you. We're back with another discussion. The last time we spoke, we finished part 2 of the book, which is Eritrea, Root Causes of War and Refugees by Mr. WoldeYesus Ammar, one of the pioneers of the Eritrean Revolution, the Eritrean struggle for independence. So we spoke last time about two things, really. I mean, it was, it was basically two things that we spoke of the last time, and it was the influence that Eritreans got, like the youth, from the decolonization of other African countries, as well as Arab nationalism. So they were inspired. And so you can say these were the coals that started to burn that would get the train. I don't think trains ran on coals. Let's just say that it was these were the first embers that would basically appear before the fire of revolt. So this is where we left off at. We did not get to revolt, but we saw that if we were to use a kind of figure of speech, we saw a group of people approaching a place in the woods with wood in their hands, preparing to start a fire to keep warm, you can say. Not to destroy, but to keep warm and perhaps protect themselves from predators or anything, trying to come and attack them. So that's where we left off. Today and now we begin with part 2, Eritrea, Liberation War and Refugees. So this resonates with the title, Eritrea, Liberation, War, and Refugees. We got through the prelude. We got through what Eritrea is as far as an entity, how it became what it is. And now we have entered the Liberation War and Refugees. My eyes look teary, but I'm not sad unless I'm crying for Eritrea. I don't know. In any case, as Eritreans, our lives, our culinary lives revolve around onions. So if you cut from the wrong place of the onion, I didn't cut any onions today, nor was I exposed to them. But in any case, that's just a joke. So let's begin. In any case, let's begin. I begin in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. I praise and I glorify him as he ought to be praised and glorified. Let's start. So, introduction. The formative stage in Eritrea's gradual buildup as an identifiable entity, recounted in part 1, culminated in a bloody conflict which lasted for 30 years. The germination of the idea of an armed liberation struggle with all its actors, the concomitant occurrence of refugeeism, and, in turn, the role of these warrior refugees in the intensification and internationalization of the conflict make up part 2 of the continuum. So this is what part 2 is going to be about. Revolution, refugees, we're there. The period of the armed struggle, during which Eritrean nationalism had been further built and strengthened, shall be treated under 2 phases, each 15 years long, and each under the domination of a different front. So Mr. WoldeYesus is telling us that he's going to divide it into 2 phases. because it's a 30-year long war, 15 years and 15 years. 15 years with one front, 15 years with another front. 15 years long, and each under the domination of a different front. Each of these fronts, as perceived by the Eritrean people, literally belonged to two distinct geographical and cultural groups within the country. The next few chapters, I'm going to say this before anything. This book will give you the insight as to what Eritrea is. I know that I may be preaching to the choir, maybe, or I may not be. I am telling you, this book, I finished reading this book, and I started and finished 2 years ago, around 2 years ago or so, maybe 2.5. That's when I started. It opened my eyes to what Eritrea is. It gave me pride and strength and just the understanding that I needed my whole entire life to understand what being an Eritrean means. From a balanced perspective, not from an extremist perspective, not from a radical perspective, but from a balanced perspective and an objective perspective. This is what I needed as someone who enjoys being convinced intellectually. Emotions, they're nice, but this is not how we convince people anything. This is how we convince. We convince using intellect, whether it's through something written or through something spoken. But this was what changed my life. I want you to know that, because I want the world to know that what changed Sammy, that my name is Sammy Sufi. What changed Sammy Sufi's life is this text. Let's continue, God willing. The next few chapters will, therefore, lay special emphasis on the material motives of the conflict, which usually make use of ethnicity and religion. Some recent writings on the Horn of Africa argued that economic marginalization provided a better explanation than ethnicity or political exclusion to the armed conflicts there. So those recent writings on the Horn of Africa saying that it was economic marginalization that provided a better explanation than ethnicity or political exclusion to the armed conflicts. These, you can find them not only in Mr. WoldeYesus's text, but also in Christopher Clapham's article, the political economy of conflict in the Horn of Africa. I believe that the journal is titled Survival, Volume 32, parenthesis 5, closing parenthesis after. So Volume 32 with 5 in parentheses, September, October 1990, page 404. Okay, so this is where you can find that to be the reason, economic marginalization. Ethnicity and religion could be used as the sure paths to material gains. Ethnicity and religion could be used as the sure paths to material gains. As John Markakis aptly asserts, material does not solely signify economic factors. For one would not regard ethnicity, language, or religion immaterial if they serve as the passport to power and privilege. I'll repeat that. So John Markakis says, aptly asserts, material does not solely signify economic factors. That's not only what material means. For one would not regard ethnicity, language, or religion immaterial if they serve as the passport to power and privilege. So language, ethnicity, and religion. Is that what we said? Ethnicity, language, and religion? These are not immaterial if they are what lead to power. So if you're using these as tools, language, ethnicity, religion, then to get to power, then they are no longer immaterial. Sure, without, if it's not for power, language is not material. Religion is not material. ethnicity is not material. These aren't material things. It's not money or any kind of anything that has some kind of value that you can gain strength through. But if you can use them in a given scenario to get to acquire leadership, then they do become material. So not just economy. You can find that in John Markakis, in the preface to John Markakis's National and Class Struggle in the Horn of Africa, Cambridge, UP, 1987, and then it says with small lowercase Roman numerals, if you were to call them that. I don't know what they call these. Forgive me for my ignorance. 7, small v I, 7. Probably because it's in the preface. It looks to me like it's a book. The preface of John Markakis's National and Class Struggle in the Horn of Africa. Let's continue. Ethnicity and religion were two intertwining cleavages, which so far played a big role in Eritrea's failure to attain statehood. Ethnicity and religion were two intertwining cleavages which so far played a big role in Eritrea's failure to attain statehood. Anyone who's Ethiopian, I need you to open your ears so you can understand what's going on, what happened in Eritrea, so that you know that Eritrea is not just, if you had it in your mind, that Eritrea is not just one or two tribes. Eritrea is many tribes. It's different tribes and different religions. Not for Ethiopia to invade us. No, this is for the Ethiopian to be educated, because I don't think, and if I'm wrong, forgive me, I don't think the average Ethiopian knows about the country to the north. Except that it has the Red Sea and there are Tigrinya speakers and they have similar food to us, and that's it. I don't think he knows more than that, the average Ethiopian. When it comes to someone who's from Tigray, maybe they're politicians, but even the average person from Tigray, I don't think knows that much. For example, in Eritrea, you have the Tigray tribe. I am 99% sure that if I were to tell people from Ethiopia the word Tigray, they would think only of Tigray. They would not even know that there's a tribe called Tigray. Anyone who's watching this and listening to this, open your ears. Ethnicity and religion were two intertwining cleavages, which so far played a big role in Eritrea's failure to attain statehood, as well as Eritreans. Open your ears as well. They were important and determinant elements in both the Ethio-Eritrean conflict and the ever-present Eritrean tussle. They were important and determinant elements in both the Ethio-Eritrean conflict and the ever-present Eritrean tussle. Eritrean versus Eritrean situation. Did such a thing exist back then? Yes, it did. If anyone from Higdef wants to say, no, we were one hand, blah, blah, don't lie to yourself and don't lie to others. Just for your information, everything that is happening, that we're dealing with here, all of it is anti-Higdef. Just to let you know. Just to let you know. This is all anti-Higdef. Of course, you're welcome to watch. I'm not going to say don't watch, but this is anti-Higdef. Whatever I'm saying is not, anything I say is not in promotion of Higdef. In any way, shape, or form, not me or Mr. WoldeYesus. They were important and determinant elements in both the Ethio-Eritrean conflict and the ever-present Eritrean tussle. Included here are introductory notes on the terms of ethnicity and religion as they are used in this book. Religion. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 15 minutes to talk about the subjects that are coming. Religion. This is the first part of the of what we will discuss in this introduction to this part. Religion. Christianity and Islam are two old, antagonistic, and indigenous forces in Eritrea and Ethiopia. Christianity was introduced to the region in the 4th century, and Islam by the Muslim refugees of the first Hijrah immigration in 615 AD. Both faiths became bases for two different cultural identities in the Horn of Africa. Where do we find the source for this Christianity and Islam? Christianity, how it was introduced, and how Muslim Islam was introduced? Trimmingham, I believe he was the one who wrote Islam in Ethiopia. Islam in Ethiopia by Spencer Trimmingham. And by the way, he's not the only source that talks about how Christianity arrived in Eritrea and Ethiopia. Ethiopia behaves as if, maybe Eritreans too, but Ethiopians probably more so, they behave as if Christianity always existed in the region. That's not true. It used to be pagan. It wasn't until the 4th century when, I believe his name was Ezana, when Ezana was either Izana or Iazana was the king in the 4th century, around between 350 to 380 AD. That's when it came through through a Phoenician from Syria, according to, I believe, Taddese Tamrat, and according to maybe others from what is known today as Lebanon, from Tyre, a Phoenician person named Frumentius. So, in any case, both faiths became bases for two different cultural identities in the Horn of Africa. The old Abyssinia, with its two main ethnic groups, Amharas and Tigrayans, that's the old Abyssinia, Amharas and Tigrayans, identified itself with Christianity and always felt nearer to Christian Europe than to its Arab and African environs. As an Ethiopian professor wrote, Ethiopia's, especially Christian Ethiopia's, image of itself is of a beleaguered country surrounded mostly by hostile or potentially hostile countries with no natural friends in the immediate vicinity. You can find that in Nuguse Ayele, quoted in S.M. Makinda, Superpower Democracy in the Horn of Africa, published in New York by St. Martin's Press, 1987, page 32. This is what Spencer Trimmingham's Islam in Ethiopia describes as a super-tribal consciousness which made Islam appear inimical and dangerous to their Christian tradition and culture. So Islam appeared to them as a threat. I would say they were afraid of it. And in that conflict, it was, as it is now, less a matter of faith against faith than of one cultural tradition against another. It's more a cultural tradition against another. The source for that is also Trimmingham, Islam in Ethiopia. So it's a culture. See, this is how I perceive religion in Eritrea and Ethiopia. Maybe there are those who follow sincerely. However, generally speaking, it's just a culture and culture. That's what it is. It's not that I sincerely understand my holy book and I know what I'm following. No, it's just a culture. It's just that mommy and daddy are Muslim, so I'm Muslim. Mommy and daddy are Christian, so I'm Christian. Maybe they can defend themselves and defend their religions. Perhaps, maybe. The Muslims might be able to do it. The Christians might be able to do it. I have seen Muslims who have done it. Christians, with the Christians, in my experience, this is my experience, so I'm not saying that this is what it is. In my experience, the Christians tend to be more followers. They're just following. It's just a culture for them. It's just a tradition. It's just something they were born into. I'm Christian because I'm Christian, period. That's it. I worship Jesus, and that's that. They don't really understand, it seems they don't understand the tenets and origins of their version of Christianity, which, by the way, has roots in Syria. Jacobite Christianity. This is Jacobite Christianity. They call it Jacobite Christianity. Orthodox Christianity, that what's found in Egypt and was found in Nubia in the past, and in Ethiopia and Eritrea these days, and in the Middle East as well, Orthodox Christianity, it's Jacobite Christianity. It's a Monophysite or Monophysite version of Christianity. It's not, in any case, it's not faith against faith. It's culture against culture. One cultural tradition against another. That's what I see. It's a cultural tradition. And if it wasn't a cultural tradition, why would one culture hate the other? Which Islam and which Christianity teach hate? I have seen it from Islam, and I have seen it from the Muslim side, and I've seen it from the Christian side. Which ones teach hate? Which Christianity and which Islam teach hate? Neither. Yeah, maybe there is a matter of dispute, meaning one religion refutes and disputes with the other over certain aspects of ideology. Perhaps. But that's not, I wouldn't call that hate. I would call that disagreement. Hate is, I just hate what you follow because I just do. That's hate. I haven't seen, by the way, in my experience, Christians openly hating Islam. I haven't seen that, to be honest and to be fair. I have heard of it being existent, though. Okay, the Abyssinians always preferred the highlands, where they lived as settled agriculturalists. The Muslims mainly belonged to the hot lowlands, where they remained pastoralists. So the highlands are like Saraye, Aklugzai, Hamasien. That area is the highlands, where you find like Mendefera, Saganati. Come on. The Barwa, these areas. This is the highlands, as well as in Tigray, as well as what makes up Tigray. I believe all of Tigray. That's highlands. So they preferred the highlands. The Muslims mainly belonged to the hot lowlands, so places like Karan and maybe the Gash area, where they remained pastoralists. The few Muslims, the Jabarti, in the Abyssinian plateau, were not allowed to own land. They were not allowed to own land and to have any access to state offices. The Ethiopian Muslim was for a long time a despised second-class citizen. In my understanding, Mr. WoldeYesus does not belong to the Muslim faith. That's what I believe. I could be wrong. I can always ask him. There's nothing wrong, by the way, being called WoldeYesus. There's nothing. If a Muslim was called WoldeYesus, nothing wrong with that, because that would mean boy of Jesus, son of Jesus. If I call myself WoldeYesus, there's nothing wrong with that. If I call myself Wolde Mariam, there's nothing wrong with that. No problem. So, anyway, so we said the Ethiopian Muslim was for a long time a despised second-class citizen, to say the least. In general terms, the Christian Kabessan peasant shared almost the same feelings and stereotypes as the other Habesha peoples, in parentheses, Amharas and Tigrayans, towards his compatriot Muslims. So the peasant, Christian Kabessan peasant, shared almost the same feelings and stereotypes as the other Habesha peoples, Amharas and Tigrayans, towards his compatriot Muslims, inhabiting mainly the hot lowlands of Eritrea. I want to mention, by the way, that Mr. Uthman Saleh Sabbe, Mr. Uthman Sabbe, whose book I'm reading, The History of Eritrea, he mentions that people in the land known as Eritrea, Christians and Muslims, they lived in peace. They traded with each other, I believe. They lived in peace. He says that now I'm about to get deeper into the, because I'm on the chapter, it's chapter 10 now, where it talks about the entrance of the Ottomans and the Portuguese. But he may be alluding earlier on in the text alluding to something in the future which I haven't seen. Maybe not. He mentions that it wasn't until the Ottomans and the Portuguese that Muslims and Christians, basically what he says is Muslims and Christians lived in peace until the Ottomans and Portuguese. So they were fine. This is what Mr. Uthman Saleh Sabbeh has said, who's also known as Usman Saleh Sabbeh. Why is it Usman and Uthman? Because likely because in the Tigrinya and also the languages which are Semitic and Cushitic, which are in the countries of Eritrea and Ethiopia, what happens is that there is no tha, it's sa. So the closest sound to tha for those who speak is sa. Just like in Syria, they'll say so in the place of tha, they'll say tab, like thalatha, talata. But they will say, in the place of the, they will say za, like a'uzu. A'uzu means I seek refuge. Like a'uzu billah, I seek refuge with God. It's a'udhu billah, but they say a'uzu billah. So that's because of their dialect. It doesn't possess the tha. So this is why there's Usman and Uthman. The proper way is Uthman, but for the one who maybe cannot pronounce the tha, or maybe was not raised pronouncing the tha, my grandpa's name was Uthman, but his name is spelled O-S, so Usman. In any case, Sabbeh mentions that, Mr. Sabbeh mentioned that there was basically peace. That there was peace until the Turks and the Portuguese came into the picture. And by the way, Jalaluddin Muhammad Saleh, who in an interview, a recent interview with some branch of Al Jazeera, one of their programs, you can say, Jalaluddin Muhammad Saleh, who's from Karan, he's an intellectual. I believe he is a writer. And he said in that interview, which is about 2 hours long, it's in Arabic, interesting interview. I find him to be an Arabist. I'm not interested in Arabist Eritreans. I still listened to the interview anyway. But what happens is he mentions that he mentions, and I mentioned this in this series, he mentions that when Ahmed Grang, the Ahmed bin Ghazi, who came from what is known today as Somalia, the Adal Sultanate, what he did, so what he would do as a retaliation or response to what the Christian Abyssinians were doing is force converting Muslims to Christianity. So what he did as a response to them is force Christians to become Muslims. And thank God, praise God that Jalaluddin Muhammad Saleh said that basically this is not allowed. He mentions the verse from the Quran, or rather, I think it's a verse that stands alone, chapter 2, verse 256. La ikraha fi din. There is no compulsion in religion. It's not allowed. So Uthman, so what Ahmed Grang means the left-handed one, Grang, I think in Amharic. Ahmed Grang, what he did was wrong, and I believe it caused the Christians, I think in the words of Jalaluddin Muhammad Saleh, either he said it caused the Christians to fear Muslims or hate Muslims, or he said that it further increased their enmity towards Muslims. It was one of the two. But he did not, if I understood correctly, he did not agree with Ahmed Gran's way. This is someone who is non-Higdef, non-Christian. He's a lowlander from Karan. I believe he's Bani Ammar. I believe. That's his tribe, I believe. So that's what he said. in that interview, which is recent. It's less than 2 months. It came out less than 2 months ago. So, in general terms, the Christian Kabbasan peasant shared almost the same feelings and stereotypes as the other Habesha peoples, in parentheses, Amharas and Tigrayans, towards his compatriot Muslims, inhabiting mainly the hot lowland zones of Eritrea. Similarly, the Eritrean Muslims generally felt closer to their co-religionists across Eritrea's borders than to their Christian Kabbasan countrymen. They felt closer to their co-religionists across Eritrea's borders than to their Christian Kabbasan countrymen. Perhaps the Sudanese, perhaps the Middle Easterners, Arabs, perhaps the Somalis. Although I want to make it clear that Mr. Usman Sabbe, he does say that, no, not Uthman Sabbe, in another text. It's called, that text, this text is I believe it's a thesis, and it's titled, I think that one is titled The History of the ELF. If you search the history of the ELF, the person's name is something Mikhail. The cover is a blue, generally I think a blue cover with a black and white image of people, Eritrean people sitting on the ground wearing white, with a white man. He's Syrian. How do I know? Because in the book you'll see that image, and with the caption underneath, holding a camera. If you just search the history of the ELF PDF, you'll find it. But it's mentioned in that text, if I'm not mistaken, in that text, that Usman Sabbe, and I praise him for this, he started, but then I don't know if it continued. He started between Ethiopian Muslims and Eritrean Muslims. He started what was known as Al-Urwatul Wuthqa. Al-Urwatul Wuthqa means perhaps the tight rope. I'm not sure. So I'm not going. I'll mention it in the next episode, in the next discussion. But he started a group called Al-Urwatul Wuthqa, which was based, I believe, in Massawa, but it was aimed to unite Eritrean Muslims and Ethiopian Muslims, because they went through the same. They were going through the same thing as under Haile Selassie, if I'm not mistaken. So he wanted to bring the two together. But I believe Idris Muhammad Adam didn't want that, because he said that, I think the reason was something along the lines of, we have like a different thing going for us. It's not that we hate them, but we just don't we have a different thing going. My personal favorite of the three leaders, the main leaders of the ELF, is Usman Sabbe. I think he was, I don't know much about the Blaine one, whose name was Usman Galadeos. I think his name was Galadeos. I think that was his name. And there was Idris Muhammad Adam. I think Usman Sabbe was the most creative, the most intellectual, from what I know. Okay, from what I know, he was the most intellectual. I think he was the most open-minded out of all of them. He was Saho. Idris Muhammad Adam, I believe, was Bani Ammar, and Usman Galadeos was, I think that was his name, Usman Galadeos. He was Blaine. He was from my tribe. But still, I find Usman Sabbe to have been more creative, more open-minded, more, I don't know, I can't say if he was better spoken, because I haven't heard the other two speak. But he was well-spoken, and he was very, without Sabbe, there is no Isaias. Without Sabbe, there is no Sha'biyah. Without Sabbe, he was one of the main, if I'm not mistaken, he was one of the main people who split, if not one of the first people who split from the ELF for his own reasons. So in any case, next time we're going to talk about ethnicity. So we talked about religion. Next, we're going to talk about ethnicity. We're going to finish the introduction, and we will go into chapter 4, Armed Struggle and Refugees, Phase 1, 1961 to 1975. So that's what we're going to talk about next time. Thanks for joining. For those of you who are not righteous, I wish you guidance. I wish you guidance. Those of you who are pro-Higdef, those of you who are pro-hate, I wish you guidance. And if you don't want guidance, I don't know what to tell you. So in any case, thanks for joining. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys are learning something. We all learn something. We're all students. I hope we can make Eritrea a great place using intellect, knowledge, and objective thinking, God willing. In any case, peace be with you. I'll see you next time, God willing.